In this video, we're going to look at using iPicture for doing a concave machining application. In other words, it's going to be used for machining in a plastic substrate, usually acrylics or Corian. Occasionally, I will use a concave machining strategy for wood applications as well. There are instances where I find that concave, in other words, inverting the entire process, versus the standard iPicture application actually works better in wood. If you haven't watched the first video, which is the convex or machining in wood application for iPicture, I recommend watching that one as well, and you'll see the distinction between the two. So I'm just going to double click on my iPicture icon and run that application. And you can see in iPicture we have the option to open an image file or a G-code file. Of course, we are working with an image file, so we're going to open an image file. And in this case, we're going to use a photograph of Abraham Lincoln. And you can see when I import it, I have the option of changing the units from inches to millimeters. In this case, I'm going to use inches. There's the size of my project. I'm going to change the image size. So this is my width and this is my height. I'm going to change my width to say 5 inches. And you'll see that it automatically changes the height proportionately, so it maintains the aspect ratio. The last number is, the last value is the depth of machining. You'll notice it didn't change when we changed the X and the Y, and that's because there is no depth to a photograph. So we have the option to manually set the depth to whatever we want. The depth when you're doing when you're doing concave machining is relative to the thickness of the material. And here's the reason why. You're going to use diffused light behind the either the plexiglass or the Corian to create the image, to kind of bring it to life. And so you want to allow as much light to pass through the lighter areas or the thin machined areas in order to create those that contrast. So we set our maximum machining depth at approximately 50 thousandths of an inch less than the material thickness. So in this case, let's say we were working with a 1/4 inch piece of acrylic. I would set the maximum machining depth at 0.2 inches, which is 50 thousandths of an inch less than the actual thickness of the material. So that will mean it's going to machine the deepest portion of this is going to be machined to 0.2 inches. I'm also going to invert the light-dark areas. Without this selected, what will happen in iPicture is it's going to machine the darker areas deepest and the lighter areas less deep. So in other words, it's going to machine the the machining area that you see around his hair, that you see around his beard, in the eyes, and on the suit, which are the darkest portions of the image. It's going to machine those the deepest. The lighter areas, like his shirt, his hands, and the background, would be machined less deep. When we invert the light-dark areas, it reverses that process. So now it's going to machine the shirt the most deep, his face also very deep, and his hands, and the background. Less deep would be the areas that are in the darker areas, so his hair and his suit. And what will happen when light passes through, it will create a light effect on the shirt and on the facial features in the hands and the background, while the suit will be darker because less light will be allowed to pass through. And that's why we invert the light-dark areas, particularly if we're doing something in a plastic like a Corian or an acrylic or plexiglass. The scan steps, I typically don't change the scan steps. You can see by default it's set at 0.007874, which is actually 0.2 millimeters. And all the scan step means is that as you're machining this project, the tool is going to move from left to right, basically machining all of the contours into this based on grayscale conversion. Then the tool is going to move down roughly 8 thousandths of an inch. It's going to move back right to left, another 8 thou, left to right, another 8 thou, right to left, all the way from top to bottom until it machines the entire project. If you set that number higher, it will machine faster, but you'll tend to have machining lines and possibly lose some detail. You set the number lower, you're going to get tremendous detail, very little machining lines, but your machining times can be enormous. So I find that the general rule of thumb that the default setting tends to work quite well. The tool type, you can see that there's a drop-down directory. The tool that comes with your machine is a 1/32 radius conical V-bit, and you can see that's the tool we selected. It's the only tool that I use when I'm doing iPicture images. You cannot add more tools to this directory, by the way. You can only use one of the 6 tools listed here. So the 1/32 conical V-bit is the best choice. Feed depth per cycle just means how deep will it machine with each pass. So in other words, we're going to be machining to a maximum depth of 0.2 inches. If I want to machine this in one pass, I would set the maximum feed depth per cycle at 0.2 inches. If I change this to 0.1 inch, it's going to actually do this in 2 passes. But in most cases, I can machine up to about 1/4 of an inch comfortably with a single pass. XY origin position, I typically always use the center, although you see we have options for the 4 corners as well. Typically, I use a material size that's larger than the size of the project. So it's important to note that the size of the project is not your material size, it's the actual size of the machining area. So I tend to use material sizes that are a little bit larger. In other words, I might use a 6-inch by, say, 7-inch piece of material, and then what it's going to do is it's going to create an untouched border around my image. I do that for the most important reason is safety. I don't want to have the machine making contact with clamps either on the left on the right or the top and bottom, or the fence along the left side of the machine. If you're using an iconic machine, if I'm machining to the outer edges of my material, that potential exists. If I create that border, that safety net around the image, then I don't have that problem. So I always make my material size a little bit bigger than my size of my project. And then lastly, or second lastly, we're going to click Preview. And this is going to give us a preview of the project. Now, it's important to note that the previews, unlike ArtCam Express, where you get a full 3-dimensional simulation of your project, the iPicture previews are not quite as powerful. They give you a basic idea of what the project is going to look like, but it doesn't give you the detailed information that you would like to have, like you get with ArtCam. But it gives you a basic idea. So you can kind of see the shadow of Abraham Lincoln in the preview. By pushing my left mouse button and rotating, I can see it a little bit better, and then by using the roller on my mouse I can zoom in. By pushing my left and right mouse button, I can move the image left, right, up and down, so I can key in on a specific portion of the image, and then I can zoom in and see exactly what I'm going to get. And again, I can rotate this around, look at it from several different angles to make sure that I'm going to be satisfied with my project. So that's what the preview function does. And again, it just gives you a basic idea what you can expect, but it doesn't give you really that fine detailed image. Then the last step is to convert it. I click Convert, and this will actually output a .gee file, which can go straight to a flash drive. And from the flash drive, of course, we can take it to our iconic machine and machine that project. And you can see that it's converting the file now. We will call the file Lincoln. I'll call it Lincoln 1 and save that file. And you can see the G-code has been saved, so I can now have that on my flash drive and we're ready to machine that project. So that is iPicture using concave machining. So this would be for use on a plastics application.